Okay, settle in. Let me tell you a story. It's a bit twisted to begin with, but trust me, it gets better. It starts, as so many things do, with a photograph. The photograph was old, faded, and slightly creased. It showed three children, maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing awkwardly, shoulder to shoulder, in front of a sprawling oak tree. Two boys, identical twins with mischievous grins and unruly brown hair, flanked a smaller girl. The girl had a cascade of fiery red curls, a scattering of freckles across her nose, and eyes that held a knowing sadness that seemed far too profound for her age. The boys were Ethan and Caleb. The girl was Ilara. And the photograph for years had been hidden in a dusty box in the attic of a grand but decaying Victorian house overlooking the sleepy coastal town of Port Blossom. This house belonged to Ethan. Ethan, who now stood, a man in his late 30s, gazing at the photograph with a tightening in his chest. He'd found it during a frantic search for old tax documents, a search he'd been putting off for weeks. He hadn't seen this photograph in decades. Decades he'd spent trying to forget. The jealousy had started young. It festered between Ethan and Caleb like a slow acting poison. They were twins, identical in appearance, but vastly different in temperament. Caleb was the charismatic one, the natural leader, the one who effortlessly attracted attention. Ethan was in his shadow, and he resented it. Their childhood friendship with Ilara only exacerbated the problem. Both boys were hopelessly enamored with her. Her intelligence, her wit, her fierce independence, it all drew them in. But Ilara, with her uncanny ability to see beneath the surface, saw something in Ethan that Caleb, in his self absorbed charm, never could. She chose him. And that's when the jealousy truly bloomed. Caleb, used to getting everything he wanted, couldn't accept it. He started small, subtle digs, dismissive comments, undermining Ethan at every turn. But it escalated. It festered into something darker, something more sinister. Then came the bullying. Not physical, not at first. It was insidious, psychological. Caleb, with his natural charisma, turned their friends against Ethan. He whispered lies, spread rumors, painted him as weak, as pathetic, as unworthy of Ilara's affection. Ethan, sensitive and introverted, crumbled under the pressure. He withdrew, becoming increasingly isolated. Ilara fought for him, fiercely defending him against Caleb's relentless attacks. But even her strength had its limits. The summer they were 14, everything changed. It started with a dare. Caleb, fueled by alcohol and a desperate need to reclaim his dominance, dared Ethan to swim across the notoriously dangerous Devil's Cove. The cove was known for its strong currents and treacherous rocks. It had claimed lives before. Ethan, desperate to prove himself, desperate to finally earn Caleb's respect, accepted the dare. Ilara begged him not to. She saw the malice in Caleb's eyes, the calculated cruelty. But Ethan, blinded by his own insecurities, wouldn't listen. He plunged into the icy water. He didn't make it. Or at least that's what everyone thought. Ethan disappeared beneath the waves. A frantic search ensued, but his body was never found. He was presumed dead. Caleb, publicly grief-stricken, privately celebrated his victory. He had finally gotten rid of his brother, the constant reminder of his own perceived inadequacies. He had won. Elara, heartbroken and devastated, left Port Blossom. She couldn't bear to stay in a place that held so many painful memories. She disappeared without a trace. Caleb inherited the family house, the family business, everything. He built a life for himself, a life based on lies and deceit. He married, had children, and became a pillar of the community. On the surface, he was a success story, but beneath the veneer of respectability, the guilt gnawed at him. He knew what he had done. He knew he was a murderer. Meanwhile, Ethan wasn't dead. He had been swept away by the current, battered and bruised, but alive. He washed ashore on a remote beach miles from Port Blossom. He was found by an old fisherman, a recluse who lived a simple life in a small shack by the sea. The fisherman nursed him back to health, but Ethan had lost his memory. He remembered nothing of his life before the accident. The fisherman gave him a new name, a new identity, Silas. Silas lived with the fisherman for years, learning the ways of the sea, finding solace in the rhythm of the waves. He was content in a way he had never been before. He was free from the constant comparison, the relentless pressure, the suffocating weight of Caleb's jealousy. But one day, years later, the fisherman died. Silas was alone again. He felt a pull, a deep, unexplainable urge to return to the place where he had nearly lost his life. He didn't know why, but he couldn't ignore it. He returned to Port Blossom. He didn't recognize the town at first. It had changed, grown, become more prosperous. But as he walked through the streets, familiar images began to flicker in his mind. He saw the oak tree, the one in the photograph. He saw the house overlooking the sea. He saw Caleb. The memories flooded back, a torrent of pain and betrayal. He remembered everything: the jealousy, the bullying, the dare, the water. He confronted Caleb. The confrontation was explosive. Caleb, initially dismissive, became increasingly agitated as Ethan Silas recounted the events of that fateful summer. He denied everything, of course. He called Ethan a liar, an impostor, a madman. But Ethan had evidence. He had the photograph. He had the scars from the rocks in Devil's Cove. And he had the unwavering conviction of a man who had been wronged. The truth began to unravel. Caleb's carefully constructed world began to crumble. His wife left him. His children disowned him. His business collapsed. He was ruined. But Ethan didn't want revenge. He didn't want to see Caleb suffer. He wanted justice. He wanted the truth to be known. He went to the police. He told them everything. Caleb was arrested. He was charged with attempted murder. The trial was a sensation. The town of Portland was captivated by the story of the twin brothers, the betrayal, and the miraculous return from the dead. Caleb was found guilty. He was sentenced to prison. But the story doesn't end there. After the trial, Ethan felt a strange emptiness. He had achieved justice, but he still felt lost. He didn't belong in Port Blossom anymore. He was still Silas, the fisherman, the man who had found peace in the solitude of the sea. He decided to leave, but before he left, he visited the old oak tree, the one in the photograph. He stood there for a long time, remembering the carefree days of his childhood before the jealousy and the betrayal had poisoned his life. And then he saw her, Elara. She had returned to Port Blossom, drawn back by the same inexplicable pull that had brought Ethan back. She had followed the trial closely, knowing in her heart that Silas was Ethan. They stood there beneath the oak tree, gazing at each other after all those years. The years had changed them, marked them with the scars of their shared trauma. But the connection between them was still there, as strong as ever. They talked for hours, sharing their stories, their pain, their hopes for the future. They forgave each other. They forgave themselves. And then they did something unexpected. They didn't rekindle their old romance. They realized that their relationship had been forged in the crucible of their youth. In the face of unimaginable adversity, they were different people now. Instead, they decided to help others. They established a foundation dedicated to supporting victims of bullying and abuse. They used their story, their pain, to inspire others to overcome their own challenges. Ethan, no longer Silas, became a counselor, helping young people navigate the complexities of their emotions, teaching them the importance of self-worth and resilience. Elara became an advocate for victims of crime, fighting for their rights, ensuring that their voices were heard. Together, they turned their tragedy into something positive, something meaningful. They created a legacy of hope and healing. And Caleb, in prison, finally found some semblance of peace. He wrote a letter to Ethan, expressing his remorse for his actions, acknowledging the pain he had caused. He didn't expect forgiveness, but he needed to say it. Ethan read the letter. He didn't forgive Caleb completely, but he understood him. He understood the deep-seated insecurities that had driven him to such extremes. He wrote back. He didn't offer forgiveness, but he offered understanding. He offered the possibility of redemption. Years later, after serving his time, Caleb was released from prison. He was a broken man, stripped of his wealth, his status, and his pride. He went to see Ethan. He didn't expect to be welcomed with open arms. He just wanted to apologize face to face. Ethan met him at the old oak tree. They didn't embrace, they didn't say much, but they stood there side by side in silence. And in that silence, there was a glimmer of hope. The jealousy had faded. The bullying was a distant memory. The crime had been atoned for. And in its place, there was something new, something akin to forgiveness, something akin to healing, and something just maybe akin to family. The photograph, the faded and creased photograph of three children standing awkwardly beneath an oak tree, was no longer a reminder of pain and betrayal. It was a reminder of resilience, of redemption, and of the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of times. There was a reminder that even from the deepest wounds, something beautiful can grow. It was a reminder that even after the storm, the sun will eventually shine again.